absolutely correct. And it's when you start off with exactly what you want, right? But then the individuals that we're seeking, they want something back, right? They want something too. And so how are we going to get this superstar general manager or this AAA technician? How do we get this individual to want to work for our business, to want to work for our company, to want to work with us and be part of our team? And so you have to define that. You know, what benefits are we going to offer? You know, I've heard of some really different benefits that are offered by shops to kind of sweeten the deal. I know a shop owner that would buy his technician boots every year, which is just a different way of incentivizing somebody. Or like Brian said, maybe it's a sign-on bonus, or maybe it's 4-day work weeks. Whatever the case may be, we want to make sure that we're getting the exact type of person that we're looking for, and we want to be attractive to them. We want to be attracted to that individual, but yet at the same time, we're selling our business and our company and what we do to that very same individual. So we have to be attractive. Good. And then the third part, they're hire, right? And so, Aaron, when we start talking about the hiring aspect, you know, what exactly does that mean to you?
He just texted me and said everything blew up at once, so I don't know if he's actually physically there right now.
All right. Well, how about you answer that for Nikki, since you guys are partners there at the shop?
Well, hiring is, you know, it's a process. I mean, there are certain steps that we have to take, you know, from, you know, the first phone interview to make sure that they're meeting our minimum requirements and expectations, to the second interview where we kind of feel them out and offer them what our incentives are, but still feel them out to see what they're looking for. Third interview, obviously, you've basically made up your mind by that point whether you're going to hire them or not. I mean, why waste your time on a third interview if it's not going to go anywhere? And then basically when you're hiring them, you're just essentially, after you've gone through all the steps, you're just essentially bringing them into the fold, and then you start to train on our way, because every shop does it differently. I mean, especially in our area, you know, there aren't very many shops that that belong to coaching companies or anything like that, and it's just, you know, fly by the seat of their pants. But getting them in and training them the appropriate way so that they fit in. I mean, it's all a process from the first contact to them signing the paperwork and filling out their tax forms. That's just, I mean, you've got to go through that process in order to actually get to the hiring part.
Excellent, excellent. And let's see if we could have Mr. Joe Evans,
yes, sir,
chime in on that. When it comes down to the hiring aspect, you know, how do you define that?
Well, one of the, I think the key is what you expect from we're talking about a technician, what you're expecting from the tech, and also what the tech is expecting from you, and have a clear understanding. I have found to have things written down. You can,
yes,
in the process of it, to me, it's just a clear understanding of what he expects, and then what you expect. So, and then as you move forward, you know where you're at, so to speak. You know where you are with him, and he knows where he's at with you.
Yep. Excellent. I love what you said about having it written down, because that's really the key of having a process. I mean, you can have a process in place that's not written down, but there's huge value, which we talk about, you know, get into having systems, you know, written down and documented, you know, operating procedures and so forth, so that, you know exactly what the drill is, you know exactly what your expectations are, like Joe said, and that individual knows what the expectations are from them back to the business. Very, very good. And then we also have, and one other thing I'll tell you, you see this last bullet point, which is Behavior Never Lies by Richard Flint. That's a very good book, and it can also be found in our library. I'll show you all the steps to finding that also, information from him. But last but not least on PAHR is retain, right? And so once we hire this individual, then what, Jim?
Well, once you hire them, you've got to onboard them, right? So you've got to take them through all your steps of training and showing them your systems. And it just continues to move on from there.
Good. Joe Severt, retain. What does that mean to you when you hear that? How would you define that?
Well, first thing I think of, I mean, it's inviting them to our family. So, I mean, we really work on culture at our shop. So like initially, before I even hired him, after the first interview, I got a culture guide that's 5 pages long. And on that interview, as they exit, I hand them that and had them go over it, before our second interview. And if they can't meet one thing in that 5 pages, we won't even have a second interview, because that culture guide's been built by our staff. And so everyone can be part of it. So anyway, retaining is just being part of the family, getting their buy-in, letting them help make decisions on equipment, expansion, new benefits, not just the owner or owners making all these decisions, and that gets them being part of the family. Just taking care of them.
I think that's fantastic. I love that you brought your whole team together to kind of put that together and hand it off. And also really appreciate the fact that if they don't meet one of those, what did you call it again? Not a criteria, but you call it
I built a culture guide, and it is actually 5 pages long. And then as I created it, I had the staff go over that with me too. I mean, once I had it completed and got their input, and once they all agreed on, what I had put together, now it's the Bible for the work, for the I-70. And so, like I said, every time we interview, after that, you have a phone interview, and then you bring them in on the first interview. And after that interview, if you feel that they could, deserve a second interview in person, and we always have our lead technician do the second interview.
Bless you.
We will already hand him that culture guide after the first one. So they have to agree to that before they'll get that second interview, and we've had some agree and not quite meet it, afterwards, and they end up not being there very long, because we're very strict. We don't want any cancer. So that.
No, I think that's phenomenal. You never really want to try to fit a square peg in a round hole. In fact, when you're hiring, it's the exact opposite. You're looking for reasons why it won't work. Instead of trying to figure out how can I make this work, maybe I can accommodate. And then what it does is it could hurt the rest of the team, right? And so you never want to do that. I think that's phenomenal, Joe, having that culture guide put together. Does anybody else have anything similar to that? A culture guide or something, a criteria that's kind of a no bend?
No, but I'd really like to see his.
Okay, well.
I was going to say the same thing, Brian. That'd be interesting to read.
Yeah. Well, Joe, maybe one day you could share that, what you guys put together. I think. Okay, yeah, email it to me. I'll share.
One of the other things
if you want, we
add to that, Brian, too, is like our onboarding. If we hire a seasoned 15-year ATEC, he doesn't grab a wrench for a minimum of 5 days. He's
Okay.
onboarded for 5 days. He goes through all of our, I mean, and by doing this, we're showing him, we want him here long-term. We want him to understand all our policies and procedures. So we go over all the policies, procedures, which he's already signed them. But we do all of our online training. So that's 2 days just of that. We do 1 full day of the digital inspection training. Even if he's did it, we do it our way. So there's 5 days before he touches a wrench.
I mean, I just think that's excellent. And you seem to be a master of the PAHR. I mean, all of that stuff is really intertwined with one another. And just you bringing in your people, in my opinion, you know, if you bringing in your people to get their input on so many things is in my opinion, part of employee retainment. Having that much involvement where their voice is heard is so important to individuals. They feel more part of the team. And I just think that that's fantastic. If you'd like to share that with me, Joe, I can share it with everybody else, your culture guide.
Okay.
When I was with Greg Sands, you know, we called it a hiring criteria. And there were just certain things that were instant knockouts. If there was one aspect of the criteria that wasn't a good fit, then it was, you know, nothing, no hard feelings, but we would not hire the individual. You know, you could do all of these steps. You know, you can prepare, you can attract the right person, you can go through the hiring process, and you can have them come do a shadow follow-up before you actually make an official offer. You can do sign-on bonuses. You can do all of this, and you can still make a bad hire. You can run the TTI testing, which I'll show you guys where that information is on the website as well, to find out what their personality is all about, and still end up with the wrong individual. But your odds go way, 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 way up when you follow these processes to get a good fit individual for your team. So very good, and thank you for sharing. Does anybody else have anything kind of similar to this culture guide, or anything close to that, or even their own hiring criteria? I just want to do some sharing with one another.
I was going to add something, Brian. It costs a lot more money to hire a new employee rather than to retain an employee that's already with you. So if you got good people, you want to try to keep them happy, and you want to take them out for lunch once in a while, or have a little meeting with them, and kind of make sure everything's good, because you want to catch problems before they blow out of control, you know. But it's a lot less expensive to keep someone than it is to try to find someone to replace them.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm going to show a slide to what you were saying, and I seen Joe Evans raised his hands too.
No, I'm sorry, I was just moving around. I had
just stretching out.
I'm raising my hand.
Oh, go, Nikki, please.
With what Andy was saying, you know, that it is less expensive to keep somebody, to retain somebody, than to train somebody new. Sometimes when you have somebody there who's a good person, who's a good worker, they're just missing a couple of things. Retraining that person can be more beneficial to retain them than letting them go if it's just one sort of misstep or one misunderstanding on how something is supposed to be done. I mean, even attitudes can be adjusted if you show enough faith in that person in order to be able to retrain them. And they end up feeling appreciated and wanted. And then when they feel that way, you end up getting better results from them by taking the time to reinvest in them. That's just my opinion.
Absolutely. You know, it's we hear Gary Gunn talk about it, and it's in his book, Turnaround Point. You know, you have to be willing, you have to be able, which is great. And I fell in love with that the first time I heard that. And it goes right in along with what I've always said when it came down to when I felt like, because I ran a lot of shops and had a lot of personnel. And when it looked like it wasn't a good fit and I wanted to give that individual every bit of opportunity to be successful, you know, I had to look at three things. There's always three things I looked at when it came down to possibly having to terminate somebody. It was don't know, don't care, and can't do. And so I always felt like it was my responsibility to take away the don't know through training and teaching and coaching and mentoring and development. But then it only left two others, which is can't do and don't care, which is actually the opposite of willing and able. And so they actually connect together. And so, but you're right, Nikki. I mean, you definitely want to give somebody every bit of opportunity to save them, to get them on board, to come along with your company culture, as Joe would say, the other Joe, sorry, Severett.